We're very excited to have Sharman with the Farm Finance team here to talk us through some of the finance processes and different things. I know a lot of you guys have lots of questions for her. There will be a time for questions at the end. So we do ask you just kind of give her time to get through it all. And then we'll have some open time at the end to answer any questions that you guys do have. So Sharman, if you want to go ahead and take it, it's all yours.
Well, welcome everyone. I do appreciate everybody taking the time out to learn a little bit more about finance, as we know that that is usually everybody's most exciting topic, right? So we thought that we would just kind of go down some of the things that you may not know, talk about a little bit who we are, what we do, some of the things that you may or may not know about our processes or about some of the things that happen behind the scenes, some of the challenges that we face, what we are doing to address those challenges, and then some of the things that you can do. You wanted to go on to the next slide, Julie? Because the people at Rees Across America, the finance office, as well as everyone, are focused on the mission. And, you know, we have our mission at always in the utmost background of what we do. We care about it. We have the integrity of this organization in the forefront, the accountability, the commitment, and the responsibility. And everybody who works there has those qualities. We have myself as the director of finance. We have separated our department into some divisions to handle some of the bigger things that we take care of. We have an accounting division with Jean Matthews as our accounting manager. We have a grants and funding request division with Trish Staples as our grants manager. The data processing division handles the deposits, a lot of the things that come in through the mail, the things that you guys are probably most used to dealing with. And that's Heather Berry, and she's our data processing supervisor. And this is a new position we've actually just created. This person will be starting at the end of the month, and we're going to have an HR, benefits, and compliance and policies division. And then we have our support staff with Marcy Beardsley, who is our accounting specialist and payback supervisor, Madison Prey, and Abby Lynch, who are our finance office specialists. One of the things that I'd just like to note is that 4 of those people did not exist as of December of last year. We unfortunately had a couple of our seasonal staff leave to do other things in the middle of Thanksgiving week. So we ended from Thanksgiving week till the beginning of January, we had 4 people in that office. So I'm really proud of the staff, and I'm really proud of the work that they did. So we'll go on to the next one. So just a real quick rundown on some of the things that we handle in the finance office. Of course, the data processing, we handle the deposits, cutoffs, matching when we do the campaigns, the wreath counts, all of the in honor and memory transactions that come in through the mail. We deal with compliance, policies, taxes. We do our annual 990. We handle annual audits. We do state registrations through with one of our projects. We have our policy drafting, review and updating of our contracts. Excuse me. We have payroll, benefits, and HR, employee compensation, you know, all the taxes and things that go along with that. We have our financial management with our budgets, cash flow, projections. We work with the production counts. We do all of our fiscal reporting, all of the reconciliations, asset management. We handle all of the insurances, the events and permits, and assisting with that. And we handle grants and funding requests and all of the corporate matching programs. And this includes applications, follow-up, tracking, management, after action letters, confirmations, requests, all of that. We handle accounts payable and vendor management, and that includes the vendor payments, the W-9 maintenance, payback reconciliations and distributions. And then we also handle a lot of the report design with systems, internal work and data flow, all of the mapping, all of the reports that we have in our finance app. Those are actually designed by us, and we work with a programmer to implement all of those. So that's kind of a quick rundown on all of the things that you may or may not have been aware that we handle. You want to go on to the next one, Julie? So some of the things that I think are kind of interesting that we wanted people to know, if we receive information through the mail that has incomplete or missing information, and this happens about 30 to 40% of the time, that can more than double the processing time. And one of the things on here you'll see is that we had up to 45,000 checks between the week of Thanksgiving and the end of the 2021 season. It takes approximately 4 to 5 minutes to completely process one check. Now, when we do the math on that, you know, you have approximately, let's see here, we have about 180,000 minutes. We have over 3,000 man hours to process all of that. Now, like I said, if we have missing or incomplete information, that can more than double all of that time. And we receive approximately 70 to 75% of our sponsorships in that last critical 6-week period. So that's why it's really critical that the information that comes to us is accurate, it's complete. We can find the codes so we can process it, because that can make a huge impact on the timing. And I know that's a lot of the questions that people have is, why does it take so long? Well, these are some of the reasons why it may take some time to get things processed. Now, our online orders can go through up to 10 steps and status changes before it becomes a finalized order. When you go to our website and you create an order, there's all the things that happen behind the scenes. It goes through our e-commerce provider, it goes through our payment provider, it becomes an order and it comes into the finance app, it goes through the creating of the order has to be paid, it has to have a status to let us know that all the things that are supposed to be there are there. Because of the uniqueness of how we have to categorize things in the system, so that, you know, the page IDs are there so we know where to put the wreath so that we can give the proper credit. All of those things have to be mapped over into our application so that when these orders come to our system, that's how we know where they need to go. And that creates, you know, a process where once that order is created, it can take up to a couple of days sometimes, depending on the payment processor, depending on the statuses, to kind of get into our system. And I know we've had some questions in the past. I just did an order, why does it not show? And those types of things. One check that we have has up to 45 data fields to enter, manage, and review, as well as tags and statuses. So what that means is when we take one individual check, we can have up to 45 data points. We have at least 7 different dates that we capture. We have the groups, the locations, we have in honor, in memory, we have individual tags, like you've seen some of the matching. All of these things have to be put in the system and they create one order line. And the statuses that we use to let the system know where things are in that process are how we allow people to see information. It's how the system knows what to do with that information. And this year we made a little bit of a change so that we allowed people to see on their reports data as we were entering it, which is a little, you know, not risky, but it allows you to see things before they've gone through all of our processes. And so when you saw things in process, what that means is we've entered it, it's gone in the system, we reviewed it, but it hasn't finished maybe having the sponsor information, it hasn't had all of the other information added to that. Our first and foremost priority is getting the wreaths to the locations and getting the group codes. And that's what we did a pretty good job, I think, because we ended up having very few issues with getting those wreaths delivered. And then I know after the fact, we have to go back and make sure that, you know, all the names and all some of the other these things are added. And in order to do that, we have to maintain the statuses. That's how they go through our system. within the programming. Some of the things people ask about in the database, I want to make sure that people understand that our database is constant and it doesn't change. When somebody has a transaction, that transaction stays in our system. If we make an order correction or somebody calls and wants to change something, that doesn't change our original data. All it does is add an order line to that data and kind of basically invalidate the previous data, but it's still there. So when people say, hey, you know, my wreath count doesn't quite match or this or that, there's a lot of behind the scenes mechanisms that go around and have the reports that talk to each other. And so our data is always there. It's always consistent. And the reporting that goes out, you know, is sometimes 24 hours behind, or this, you know, this report doesn't match that report because it hasn't been updated or refreshed, but the data is always there. We also have people ask us about names. We have what we call direct and indirect sponsors. Direct sponsors would be if we received a check in the mail and it's made by an individual. That is a direct line from the money to us. An indirect sponsor would be somebody that maybe gave a check to a VFW, and then the VFW sends us the check and it has a list of names on it. And so we do have people question why we can or can't have different names show on our website. And the payor will always be the direct sponsor. That will always follow that transaction through for tax purposes, for a lot of different purposes. We are working in our system. We should have that able to be released before season so that we can track different names. So let's say you wanted to have an acknowledgement, because we do have people say, hey, I want this person's name to show on the website. We'll be able to do that because we'll be able to have up to 4 different categories of classifying the names while we keep the direct line of the sponsorship in line with the payor. People ask about W-9s with some of our payback groups. The tax ID number has to match the pay-to for the check, and we require that because if at the end of the year that organization is required to receive a 1099, that's what will happen. We do ask that people fill that out and send that back to us when we request it, or if we have a change that we need to update, or if we need to just, you know, start doing it again, because we start doing that, you know, every couple of years we try to get those updated. We just implemented and put out, with the help of the liaison team, order correction requests. They need to be within 60 days. We were literally having 8 or 9 months back of order corrections. And that totally is horrible to try to go back for us. When we have 8 months worth of orders to go through, when we do our payback recon, when we do our wreath count recon, all of that information, to have to go back consistently was just, you know, really a little bit too much. So we had to put that 60-day limit in, which will help us a lot be able to not have to go through and reconcile 12 months worth of back paybacks every time we do a month reconciliation, which is kind of what we have to do now. We get a lot of information in with page IDs or names on groups or locations. And that really can create a lot of extra work because we have to pull all those and we have to go research them. And as I said earlier, anytime that we have to pull that out, that can more than double the processing time. And we actually have a pretty good system. Excuse me just a second. We actually have a pretty good system of, even when we open up the mail, we sort it by the type of transaction that it is. So if it has an honor, in memory, if it has just a group or location, if it has, you know, just nothing with it, because we do have people just send in checks without any types of forms that don't go through groups or locations. And so that makes our processing faster. And so everything we do has meaning, and everything we do is trying to create efficiencies so that we can process these things especially during season, to get them in the system quicker so that people can see that. One of the issues that we have had is mailing checks that are weeks old. We had over 40% of our checks that came in during the Thanksgiving break to the end of the year was over 4 weeks old between the date of the check and the postmark date. And so what happens when that gets returned to us, sometimes people will cancel their checks. We'll have to follow up on NSF checks. We'll have fees. We have sponsors calling us wondering why their check hasn't been cashed, or we have to go search for it in the system. So we just ask that people try to send those in timely, because then that just speeds up all of the processes that we have in place. We don't have to go through and search and look for things that we may not even have. And that just helps people have a lot more confidence that, you know, things will be processed in a timely manner, as well as even cashing the checks. We do have people call and want to change sponsorships on orders that they may or may not have done themselves. For all online orders, that has to come from the sponsor. When somebody goes onto our website and creates a sponsorship, or they put a sponsorship in our system, they did that with the information that they wanted to do at the time, and they're the ones that have to request that. We want that order to stay intact and have that data integrity all the way through the system. So I know that maybe, especially some of the coordinators may see those things and want to be able to request that we add a group or this or that, but we have to have the sponsor request that. One of the interesting things that we had last year, we had over 420,000 order lines during 2021. And about 70,000 of those were from checks. The rest were from online, which that's a lot, I believe. And that's pretty amazing. We hadn't sat down and looked at that data until recently. We usually do that at the end of the year. We ask that you go through us for all grants and funding requests. If you're using our tax ID number, you need to go through us, and we have that link a little bit later in the slides. But it's really important that people go through us, because when you're requesting information and you're doing anything that involves our tax ID number, we have to make sure that we know what's going on with that we can have that already, so that when we get the funds, they'll go to where it's supposed to go. I get a lot of after action letters at our office. I get a lot of confirmation requests about the funds that we've received. And if people don't go through us, then I may or may not even have access to that information, and that doesn't look good for us. It doesn't allow us to put the sponsorships where they, were originally intended to go. So we just ask that you really go through our grants department, because they're amazing. They will help you. They will process it. They will keep track of it. We have all of the data. We have a lot of the frequently asked questions. And usually in any type of grant or funding request, you have to sign on the dotted line. And that usually should be somebody from our organization, should be somebody from the finance department making those authorizations. So we would just request that you do it. We still will work with you. We still will help you find things in your area. We will do whatever we can to support you. We just ask that you just communicate with us, and communicate with your liaisons, and let us know what we can do to assist you, because that's what we're here for. Let's see. Please don't send cash. You cannot imagine how much cash we had gotten last year. Please use money orders, bank checks, or sponsor online, because we have actually received envelopes that were ripped in half. Some of the information may or may not have gotten to us. So please, we can't guarantee what happens between the time that you mail that and the time that we receive it. So the other thing is that our processes require us to kind of pull cash out. So if you send us in a tally sheet and it has cash and checks, that's going to have to be split. So when you're looking for that total on your dashboard, it's going to be in two different amounts because we can't process the cash and the checks in the same transactions because they don't go to the bank the same way. So please don't send checks. We've had people write on sponsors' checks. Please don't write on people's checks, memo or otherwise. If you want to add the group or location, please use our forms. We really should not be altering anybody's checks, dates, memos, anything like that. So please just use our forms that we have. And I know that there's a link later on with that too. So there we go. Do you want to go to the next slide, Julie? So the challenges that we face, the systems we use are constantly being maintained and upgraded. Now, this is a result of both internal and external requirements. And I have to say that we have an amazing system. I know maybe some people get frustrated a little bit with it, but it is absolutely awesome. We have logistics, we have the managed pages, we have the finance app, and all of these systems integrate so that we can take information from one place to another, and we can get your grave counts, we can get the sponsored wreaths, we can get the cutoffs, we can get all of these things to coordinate between those systems so that we can provide information to you as volunteers. We can provide information for the trucking companies. We can provide information to the cemeteries. And to be able to take a financial system and a non-financial system and be able to integrate that so that the processes are pretty seamless, I think is pretty amazing. And when I first started with the organization, about 7 years ago, they were keeping track of wreath counts in QuickBooks. So I think that we've come a really long way. Another challenge we face is that we normally receive 70 to 75% of our sponsorships in the last 6 weeks. So we get, slammed, and we have, all of these things come in. And so that's probably always going to be a challenge because we're always going to have, that level of involvement happening around that time of year. The workflow timing, that's just going to be difficult. And it's really difficult to bring people in seasonally and try to get them trained. That's just really very hard. We've done some other things outside of that, which we can talk a little bit on later. Where the challenges, we're required to maintain compliance with federal, state, local regulations, as well as industry standards and best practices. And these are all constantly changing. So all the things that we do, a single transaction may affect an accounting pronouncement. It may affect an internal revenue ruling. It may affect an online compliance. So there's all these things that we have to constantly maintain and make sure that we're in compliance with. And the biggest challenge for our offline activity is not the data entry, it's the data interpretation, which, like we had mentioned earlier, much of the data that comes to us doesn't follow the required information. And so we literally have had people send in with their cemetery is listed on the return address of their envelope. We've had people write things on the backs of papers. That's really difficult for us to interpret. And anything that isn't clear cut, we have to follow up on. And again, that adds time to our processing. Our outside payment providers and other software applications are continually changing, which requires us to update our platforms as well. And our data integrity system and sponsor security has to always be maintained. And so we always have to make sure that whatever changes that we do don't make us vulnerable to any type of data breach. And so that's why we are continually upgrading and maintaining our systems. And so sometimes that may cause a lag in some of the reporting, but like I said, remember that we always have the data and that's always maintained. So we've tried to create some efficiencies to break away, some of this essential data. And these are just the challenges that we are probably going to continue to face. And so we just have to learn to adapt and learn to be more efficient. Okay, Julie. So some of the things, we are constantly working to try to be better. And we are constantly trying to improve our system integrations, working with our programming team to improve the communication between the systems, as well as update the reporting to provide more consistent information, so that more of the things that we may have to do manually, like following some of the logic checks through, or downloading the reports, we're working to have the system be able to do this and be able to tell us if there's something that needs to be looked at, or something needs to be fixed, or we need to go through some of our processes and update them. We'll be able to have the system do that instead of us having to do some of that manually. So we're trying to increase our efficiencies. We've actually designed the system to be able to upload some of the data instead of doing it manually, which that will be huge. We are actually going to be releasing in the next, well, it's actually done. We're just testing it right now. We'll be able to scan some of the information in that we've been manually entering. Now, we'll still have to review it and process it, but this will allow us to have about a 25% savings in efficiencies, which will mean that we can be faster and we can spend more time going through the other processes instead of doing the manual data entry systems. Because, like I said, every check that comes through our door gets hand entered. And that is just, realistically, that's not going to be sustainable. So we're trying to get so that we can have these things in place and we can maintain the level of output that we need to have. We're also, like I said, creating some additional reports to eliminate the need for some of the cross-system checks that we do, and create some overall more functionality for people. Some of the reports that people will be able to have, we'll be able to have a lot more information on the paybacks. That I know a lot of people have asked about the paybacks, so that's in process. Updating the system with these types of scans, these types of importing data, we'll be able to kind of touch it once, use it twice. So instead of entering the same information in more than one place, we'll be able to scan it and have it be used in more than one place, which those will create efficiencies too. And mapping to our other financial systems to allow for more remote involvement. What that means is a lot of the information that is in our systems that everybody works with, that's not our financial system. That's not where our financial records are maintained. And so we have to take all of that data, all those recounts, everything, bring that into our financial system so that we can create financial reports such as our tax return. And so we're being able to map all of that information over so that we don't have to manually bring that into our financial system as well. And just designing the system to be less manual overall. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, so that at the end of the day, we can have more assisting from the outside. We can have more remote access while maintaining the data integrity, maintaining the security that we need to have, so that people aren't necessarily being able to sign into our systems and get into the whole application, but they can still work with some of our data. Next one's Julie. So these are some things that you can do. If you have a question, please ask your regional liaison. They're happy to help, and they are your first point of contact. They do a great job. I think that one of the things about Reads Across America is that the teams that we have are so top shelf. They work really hard and we work really well together. And the customer operations department, communications, all these departments work very well. And your regional liaison is there to assist you with all of your questions, and they can direct you if you need to be directed. And so we encourage you to reach out and ask questions. That's going to be the best thing that you can do, especially there's no silly question. Please just ask, because sometimes, it may not be the answer that you think. Be sure that all your mailed orders show accurate and complete information on our forms with the correct group and location. I can't tell you how many different forms we have come in where people don't have their information on there. They don't have their IDs. It's not easily found. It's just really difficult. And like I said before, anytime you do that, that's going to increase the processing time. Be timely in mailing your orders. That's huge. If we had had a lot of the orders mailed timely, we would have had probably at least 15% of our Thanksgiving and after stuff would have been mailed before there, and it would have been already processed. Use our approved forms found on the resource page. Please don't send in old forms, especially with some of the older paired products and some things that we may or may not longer even use. Please don't staple checks to the paperwork because we have to take those staples out. And sometimes it actually takes the information off, and every check that we have has to be processed up on through. It has to be scanned to the bank. And if the bank can't read it, then we have to go through another whole process. So please don't staple the checks, and please don't send cash again. And if you have multiple groups or locations, please don't ask to move them around, or please try to make sure that when you send them in, you know where you want them to go. Because remember, every time we move orders around, it causes problems because we look at our cemeteries, we look at what they're doing, we try to make projections on trucking. And so moving wreaths around, it really causes a lot of issues with us trying to make sure that we have everything in the proper place and that all of the things that are there stay there. So it just causes problems for us, especially also with groups. The name and the address on the wreath sponsorship form must match the name on the form of payment. We have a lot of sponsorship forms come in with a different name than what's on the check, and the check is going to win every time. So it just takes extra time for us if that doesn't match. And complete the grant notification form prior to requesting a grant or other funding. And this will ensure that they're properly credited to your account. We get checks because people may apply for something and then we get a check at HQ. We have no idea that somebody has gone on and applied for it. And I will tell you that probably 95% of the time, they don't have your information on the check stub. So we have no idea. We do get lots of checks in the mail that don't, they don't want any type of location or group. And so many times they will just send us a check and they may have, a reference on there, but it has nothing to do with the group or location ID. So please use that form, and we can make sure that when the funds come in, they'll be matched up with an outstanding request and they will get credited properly. And please include all applicable information. When you're doing an honor in memory, we really want to make sure that we get those posts correct. Please make sure they're legible, because we've had people go on and actually try to find a grave or find this so we can get the information correct. And we can't process and send an email if we don't have an email address. We can't send an honor card if we don't have a mailing address. And we really want to make sure, because every wreath represents an individual, and we want to make sure that they get handled in the proper way. So please make sure that you put all of your information for an honor and in memory of orders.